Welcome to a podcast interrogating strategy with Dennis Manganyan. My guest this morning is Mr. Kent Smack, Managing Director and Strategy Specialist at ESM Software Group, United States of America. Mr. Kent has spent over 20 years training and consulting in the Balanced Scorecard and Strategy Focused Organization framework. He's an innovator of strategy management software that maximizes the value of cloud computing applications to end users. Mr. Kent is a certified expert in business improvement consulting, strategic planning, developing balanced scorecards to manage and execute strategy. Welcome, Mr. Kent.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. Thank you.
Mr. Kent, can you tell us about ESM and its offerings? ESM, the software group, and what is ESM all about? And how long has ECSM been around? And a little bit about your client base.
Yes, certainly. So first of all, I have spent my entire strategy journey working with Doctors Kaplan and Norton. They are the originators of the balanced scorecard concept and founders of the organization that I now manage. And it's been a really fun journey going through, I would say, different iterations and shifts around balanced scorecard, different generations of balanced scorecards, as well as introducing the concept of strategy focused organization, execution premium, all of these models that Doctors Kaplan and Norton have really evolved as they have, I would say, matured their understanding of strategy management and tested, most importantly, tested these concepts in, through many implementations. So over the past several decades, I've worked closely with them. We've been responsible for implementing these strategy frameworks in over 1,000 organizations. Many of those organizations have achieved what we consider breakthrough results, and they have been inducted into the Balanced Scorecard Hall of Fame. So we've learned a lot through these implementations over the years, Dennis. And what I might do, if you allow me, I might just share my screen and just do a quick introduction about about ESM, so that people have a better understanding there. So let me just share my screen there.
Right.
And can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen now.
Okay. So introducing ESM, and we've gone through various company names over the years. Originally Balanced Scorecard Collaborative, Palladium Group, and now ESM. Our mission has not changed, and that's really trying to proliferate the concept of effective strategy management and strategy execution on a global basis, and doing that through the implementation of balanced scorecards and strategy maps. We'll go into more detail on these concepts in a bit, but helping organizations understand their initiatives, many call those projects, and the impact those projects are having against the business strategy. Helping organizations mitigate the risk against both those projects as well as their high-level strategy to ensure that they are ready for major paradigm shifts or potential risk events that could occur. Cybersecurity, linking in strategy, risk, and cyber in this day and age is critically important, that these aren't managed independently as isolated entities, but rather incorporated together, thinking holistically about how an organization manages their cyber and compliance posture. And then we've also seen frameworks evolve. Balanced scorecards, can cascade very easily down to frameworks such as OKRs or down to personal goal plan type frameworks, so that we're linking and making the strategy really meaningful and actionable for employees. So that's really at a conceptual level what ESM is all about. As I mentioned, We've spent several decades working very closely with Doctors Kaplan and Norton, the founders of our organization, the creators of the Balanced Scorecard, strategy maps, strategy focused organization, as well as execution premium methodologies. And what I like to really sum these books up as is that what we are doing when we implement these frameworks or implement the ESM software application is we're putting strategy in the context so that a CEO, a director, a manager, a frontline employee can really understand what that strategy means to them and what they should do differently as an individual, as running a department or running an organization to really improve performance. So we're really trying to put strategy in the context so that it can be managed at all levels. That's the way I really like to sum up the methodology and the frameworks that we've implemented. Over 1,000 organizations have benefited from this. I have worked closely with Dennis and ESEC out of South Africa for over 13 years. We've partnered together on many implementations in the for-profit as well as not-for-profit space. I would consider Dennis foremost expert on strategy execution and strategy management. It's been really fun evolving these frameworks with both him and his organization over that time, and it's been exciting doing these types of projects together. So, Dennis, that's what I would say is a quick introduction to ESM. It only took me 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Kent. I think you covered quite a lot in terms of our relationship, but you've also covered quite a number of interesting points about the strategy execution framework and how Balanced Scorecard can actually enable, empower CEOs, employees, and leaders within an organization in terms of tackling some of these strategy-related matters. But Kent, talking about these strategy-related matters, and you mentioned earlier on challenges associated with execution. Now, post-COVID-19, the COVID pandemic introduced several significant events, Kent, across various sectors, right? COVID
Yes.
Accelerated digital transformation. We've also seen in some instances global supply chain disruptions, trade wars, global tensions, geopolitical tensions, changing consumer behavior and preferences, remote work revolution as it's happening in South Africa, the new landscape of vaccination requirements, especially in the hospitality industry. Clearly, a modern CEO is faced with a very difficult task of responding to all these factors. So now I want to ask you a few questions around these, Kent, because these events collectively forced organizations across sectors to reevaluate their strategies, adapt to the changing landscape, and prepare for a future marked by resilience, agility, and digital transformation. But can you explain for those people who don't understand where the strategy management process starts and where it ends? Can you explain the concept of a strategy refresh and why it's important for organizations, given this context and background?
Certainly. So, one thing is for certain, right? Nothing stays the same. We see cyclical events. We do see history repeating itself, but there are always changes, right? So organizations must be able to adapt to change. And by keeping strategy ever present, and that's what we think about when you are doing effective strategy management, it is a living thing within the organization. So it's not a passive print the strategic plan and put it on the shelf, right, until next year, and then we revisit it. But it is a living thing. It takes a shape within an organization as a balanced scorecard, as a strategy map, as an OKR framework, but it becomes a living thing in an organization. And it's critically important, right, for organizations to think of strategy as something that is being, responding to the environment, something that is ever present and something that is ever changing. So you need to be able, you need to be a nimble organization in this day and age, right? When COVID hit, some organizations could pivot and could adapt very quickly. So they were strategically prepared. And a lot of times that you don't just leave it up to a whim, but you actually have instilled discipline around strategy management. So the team feels comfortable coming back to the drawing table and saying, hey, COVID hit, or this supply chain disruption just occurred, right? So we've already thought about our risks and what the triggers are, though, are going to be around those risks and how we've been mitigating against them. So the worst time to do strategic planning is when a major catastrophe occurs, right? Or when a major environmental shift occurs. The best time to do it is, I would say, when there's a certain degree of steadiness and comfort within the business. And when we think about that, right, you need to constantly reinvigorate the organization. You need to innovate as an organization. So you need to not only be nimble as an organization, but you need to be thinking about, okay, what are our 3 to 5 year organizational goals or objectives? What are we trying to achieve? How are we going to align the workforce to those? And then we can identify new opportunities coming out of that. So this is strategy really 101, right? Where an organization, how do you optimize your resource allocation, right? How do you enhance organizational focus and alignment, right? You do that through a strategy refresh. So a strategy refresh, usually those are triggers, right? Things that become stale, revenues are dropping, costs are going up, right? All of these factors usually contribute to the leadership team looking at one another and say, what do we need to do differently? Some organizations will call that a burning platform. So a key trigger, right, to when you need to really refresh that strategy is when you as a leadership team feel that it's become stale, there's been a major external shift or event, or you have literally a burning platform, proverbially, something going on in the organization that you must change or you risk failure as an organization. So I would sum, Dennis,
Right.
those up as kind of the key triggers and what I think of as a strategy refresh. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, Kent. And I think that takes me now to the next point. And I'm going to raise this issue in the context of strategy management processes. So, for example, digital transformation acceleration, right? The pandemic accelerated the pace of digital transformation across industries, as you mentioned earlier on. Companies were forced to adopt and scale digital technologies to maintain operations, serve customers remotely, and optimize processes. This digital transformation triggered strategy refreshes to prioritize technology investments, enhance cybersecurity measures, and explore new business models in the digital chain, in realm rather. But now, Kent, let's focus on the strategy management processes. We know that a number of organizations are so used to manual processes of strategy planning. They are so used to face meetings, and yet they're presented with all these complexities. There's still a need to collaborate with external stakeholders, collaborate with external employees, collaborate with board members, and all these processes are manual. So, are there any tools out there in the market that can assist in automating these strategy management processes? I'm talking here processes for strategy planning, processes for strategy execution, monitoring, and evaluation, and also tools that can enable collaboration within an organization.
So, Dennis, what we've worked really hard within ESM over the years is, I like to say, that 1,000+ organizations that we've served over the past couple decades, they have provided us with the basis from which we created ESM software applications. So ESM strategy is a platform that does exactly that. It helps organizations formulate and design their strategy, to think of it in the context of the new digital era. And they can now incorporate concepts such as change agenda, SWOT analysis, Porter's five forces, pastel analysis, and we're doing that right in the platform. So they're thinking about, okay, what's the impact of changing market dynamics, for example, or we have a lack of alignment. How are we going to shift the organization to close that gap? Some of our strategies we feel are outdated and need to be kind of reinvigorated. How do we develop an innovation theme-based strategy? How do we incorporate feedback from our customer segments, from our stakeholders, from our shareholders, right? What is the impact of, potential external disruptions on the strategy? These are all questions that come to bear when we're going through a strategy formulation exercise, and we're doing that right in the ESM software application. That then creates a connection between strategy formulation and what I would say strategy design into an executable framework. And it's important to make a distinction there. In one case, you're formulating what your strategy should be, but that doesn't mean that you are now ready to execute, right? You need to put it in an execution ready framework. And that's why the balanced scorecard with OKRs, balanced scorecard with personal goal plans, that puts it in an executable framework from which you can then talk about. You can report on progress. You can make business decisions based off of it, right? And you're able to accurately communicate that out to the workforce. So ESM strategy is a platform that does exactly that. It helps an organization achieve the leverage through geographically dispersed employees, through employees that come at the business from different angles and have different areas of responsibility. They see how they all fit together. It's like a puzzle.
Great, Kent. That brings me to my next question, Kent. Decision-making structures. I'm talking here governance structures that are responsible for interacting with the external world. They are responsible for processing what happens outside of the organization. The time that it takes for those decision makers to take their resolutions and disseminate their decisions to employees or to other affected parties within an organization, especially when you're talking of large organizations, your 10,000 plus. We know from experience, Kent, that quite often decisions that are made at the highest level, it takes time for them to filter down to where they're actually meant to have that desired impact. How can a tool like ESM facilitate collaboration, communication, and ensuring that decisions taken at the highest level are actually communicated effectively and timelessly to all affected parties in an organization?
So I'll use an example to share my response and to kind of illustrate and to bring this process to life. Organizations that implement this framework and leverage technology such as ESM strategy, they are able to, and this is the aha moment, I like to say. They're in that strategy discussion, call it a strategy review meeting, right? Or a performance discussion on a monthly, quarterly basis. But they are in that strategy review and they are making decisions. They're looking at areas that are off track around performance in the strategy, and they're making decisions. Those decisions are what we call action items. They are where you can take action against the strategy. Within our system, we are keen on assigning accountability for action items, accountability for representing an objective, a measure, or an initiative. And so when you capture that action item, you're assigning an owner or someone who's accountable. That person immediately gets an email alert even if they're not in that strategy review meeting, saying that they have a follow-up item against a strategy and immediately puts it on that individual's dashboard. It immediately attaches it against that objective or that measure that we were discussing as part of our business performance review. So there's no hiding, right, this decision and this action. And the communication is immediate from the executive leadership team, and it proliferates all the way down throughout the organization. Anyone who's accountable for that piece of the strategy, they now have a follow-up item to take care of. Sometimes it's tactical in nature. Sometimes it is more strategic in nature, but they now have a follow-up. They've direct feedback.
It does, Kent, and I think there's one point I want to make in particular because we live in a constantly evolving, dynamic world where one event can make your strategy irrelevant, and you need to test some of the assumptions that you made when you formulated the strategy. So it's so important that information, decisions that are taken at that level are actually communicated as quickly as possible to all the relevant and affected parties. But it brings another question, Kent, that is those who operate in a highly competitive world are faced with the challenge of ensuring that they respond as quickly and as faster as possible to external threats. Now, what happens? What are the potential challenges or obstacles that organizations might face, if they don't adopt digital technologies, platforms like ESM? Because obviously, the one company uses digital technology to facilitate the dissemination of information within its organization. The other company still uses and still relies on manual, paper-based processes.
We have done research over the past 20 years. We've partnered with Harvard Business Publishing to release a lot of this research. It is captured in a lot of our Balanced Scorecard Hall of Fame reports, as well as some of our readers. Many of those are available through Harvard's website as reprints. But we have found a profound difference, anywhere between 30 and 60% gap between organizations that adopt a framework like the Balanced Scorecard, organizations that implement a tool like ESM, organizations that undergo a regular reoccurring strategy refresh, organizations that incorporate risk management into their process, and organizations that don't do any of that. We've seen anywhere between 30 and 60% gap between those organizations. And what we think of that is as those who are have demonstrated excellence in those areas and those skill sets are leading, right? Are typically leading the industry. So they are growing rapidly. They are innovating rapidly. They are adjusting to the digital transformation. They're adjusting to AI in the incorporation of AI into their business models. So they are nimble enough where they're able, again, coming back to the strategy being a living thing that is always changing somewhat. You need to have stability in organization, but you do need to be flexible around the edges to be able to incorporate AI into your business model, right? To incorporate risk or the increased risk of cyber events against your business. So it's important to for strategy to be somewhat constant so that individuals don't continually say, what's our strategy this week, right? But you do need the ability to incorporate, right, these what we are probably going to call paradigm shifts within the market. So it's finding that balance. In organizations that do that really well, that take a disciplined approach to strategy management, have the tools and have the processes in place, are so much better equipped to be able to handle that and to become, what we call strategy-focused organizations.
Great, great. Kent, let's talk about remote work revolution. And obviously, the pandemic necessitated a massive shift towards remote work. So, in terms of planning, workforce planning, organizations don't have to think in terms of a physical space. You could have a decentralized team, right, today. So, can you tell us
Yes,
how a tool like ESM can assist organizations in implementing a decentralized organizational model and particularly enabling processes such as planning, reporting, performance reporting, and tracking of multidisciplinary projects?
certainly. So, what ESM strategy does really well is it introduces a disciplined, step-by-step approach. So, do you have a clear understanding of your external environment, right? Do you understand market trends, customer preferences, the competitive landscape that you're living in today? What are the technology impacts against your business? Especially if you're dealing with working with the government, regulatory changes or new requirements, right? There are all these disruptors and shifts, right? So you need to understand that external environment. ESM, through the strategy formulation, helps incorporate that external environment, right? And what we're ultimately doing here is we're aligning a business's mission and vision to what they are going to execute over the course of a, you know, 2 or 3, 4 year period. And then we're making it concrete. We're making it so that it's realistic, it's achievable with goals, with measures against those goals, with initiatives and programs we're going to implement to help realize and move us closer to that vision and our mission as an organization. But we also need to, and what ESM solution helps organizations do is understand what do our customers want from us? Who are our customers? What are our key customer segments? What are our, in a for-profit organization, our most profitable customers, right? So now we start thinking about segmenting our customers and where we need to focus the energy, right? That in turn helps us create internal alignment and help us better engage. And it's really pulling the right levers, right, as a management team and communicating that right strategy and driving that right behavior through the articulation of the strategic measures, right, so that we are actually implementing the strategy that we set out to do. And we're doing all this in the context of being flexible, of being responsive to feedback from employees and from our customers, because strategy is a hypothesis, right? It's what we believe we will achieve if we implement and pull these levers in the right way, right? That doesn't mean we've got it perfectly. So we need to be adaptable to the shifts and the changes and where we got wrong and massage the strategy. I kind of go with an 80-20%, right? 80% of our strategy is going to be the same year after year. That 20% is where we're iterating, we're shifting, we're being agile as an organization and demonstrating that flexibility so that we can always evolve that strategy over time and fine tune it, right? So what ESM is doing really well is helping to break down the pieces of the strategy to help you allocate resources, to communicate it clearly and succinctly, to incorporate a feedback layer, and to provide a constant mechanism from which to evaluate the performance, right? You don't want moving targets. You want established targets. So that then tees up a really healthy environment for monitoring, for learning, right, and evaluating performance over time. So those are some of the considerations I would make. as an organization who really wants to get serious around their strategy and incorporate a discipline model such as a balanced scorecard or a strategy map into their organization.
Great. Thank you, Ken, for that. Now, let's move on to the next part of our discussion. That is key lessons from bad strategy implementation. Kent, strategy refresh is a critical phase in any organization's growth and success. However, even with careful planning and meticulous analysis, not all strategies yield positive results. Now, let's delve into the realm of bad strategy implementation by examining a few notable case studies and by understanding that the factors that contributed to their failure. I believe we can learn valuable lessons about the importance of effective strategy, refresh, and identify pitfalls. But I also like us to focus on if we had a digital platform, a data strategy, and an organization supported by, business intelligence, how would have things pan out? I've got an example here in the form of Kodak. Now, Kodak means digital transformation. Kodak, as you know, once dominant player in the photography industry, they failed to adapt to the digital transformation revolution. Despite having invented the first digital camera in 1975, the company hesitated to embrace this disruptive technology. They clung to their film-based business model, failed to recognize the seismic shift towards digital photography. By the time they realized their mistake, it was too late. Kodak filed for bankruptcy, as you know, in 2012. And I believe this case highlights the importance of proactively embracing technological advancements and being open to change, right? So now let's talk about some of the key lessons, right? And one being obviously how anticipate and adapt to disruptive technologies. That's one. But most importantly, it's how does an organization use a tool like ESM to inform, to educate, to create awareness, and to ensure that you execute your strategy?
And when I think about Kodak, when I think about others such as Polaroid, uh, and even other organizations, I think Sony very much kind of missed several waves. I think it all comes back to, I think, two key areas. One is a resistance to change and an organization's inability to overcome inertia, to overcome status quo, right? So when we think about resistance from employees or from stakeholders or shareholders, right? That can dramatically hinder the strategy refresh process and the ability for an organization to recognize a burning platform or the need to do a major paradigm shift in what it's offering or how it's serving customers. So I can contrast the Kodak and the Polaroid experience with an organization like Netflix. If you think of Netflix, 2 decades ago, they were sending DVDs through the mail. And I still remember their business model and the DVDs in a little red envelope arriving in the mailbox. They recognized, right, a major shift to online, to streaming services. And they were able to overcome that potential resistance to change or overcome the inertia to do business as usual, right? And pivot that organization. So can that organization break free from established routines, ingrained processes and practices, right? And I think it takes strong leadership. I think the leaders need to clearly articulate that need for a change and can communicate the benefits. And most importantly, lead by example. So Kaplan has written many articles about this concept and this notion of not just being a good manager, but being a good leader. And I like to say a manager is someone who can kind of get the work done, right? A leader is someone who does it with charisma and is able to attract a following and to culturally help drive a shift within the organization. So overcoming inertia, overcoming that resistance to change within these types of organizations that have failed, typically it comes back to that leader's inability, right, to be both a good leader and a good manager and to adequately shift that organization. Sometimes they don't recognize it, right? But to be a good leader, you need to be able to, I think, celebrate the small wins. You got to be able to drive that innovation culture, right? And really continuous improvement. And that means being open to criticism, being open to feedback. In many organizations I've worked with, it's that frontline employee, that truck driver, that front receptionist, the janitor who cleans the building, who comes up with the most innovative concept or innovative idea because they don't have a perfect view of the organization's strategy. They don't see the four walls, the ceiling, and the floor. They see an open canvas, and therefore they aren't locked into a certain paradigm or a way of thinking yet. And that spurs incredible creativity. And some of those most innovative concepts have come from places where you least expect it. And that's part of the beauty of bringing this framework to life is you're able to communicate it out and help mitigate against, right, becoming that next Kodak or that next Polaroid, and rather being able to shift the organization to one like Netflix did so well, or even Apple did so well. I'll
Great,
stop there.
great. No, no, absolutely, Kent. And this brings me now to the next case study, and this is about misalignment with the industry, and the importance of ensuring that leaders continuously monitor industry evolution, monitor customer behavior, and be able to feed that information back into an organization, because it's very important that strategy interrogated at all times. The next case study, Kent, is Nokia. Once a leading mobile phone manufacturer, they failed to recognize and adapt to the smartphone revolution. They held a dominant position in the market, but underestimated the growing consumer demand for touchscreen devices and app ecosystem. Their focus on hardware and reluctance to embrace software innovation led to a decline in market share and eventual acquisition by Microsoft. Now, this case demonstrates the criticality of staying attuned to changing consumer needs, right? Anticipating industry shifts and fostering a culture of innovation within an organization. Right. Now, let's focus on this, Kent. And I know that there's one dynamic function within ESM that is called the customer perspective, where one can actually be a bit innovative in terms of bringing the external world into the organization, get executives to interrogate what's coming into their world through that perspective, and get employees involved in innovation projects, and get decision makers and IT departments to say, guys, how do we respond to some of these external threats? In this case, it's Nokia having failed to recognize and to adapt to the smartphone revolution.
And I would even throw in there, in addition to Nokia, and I love the Nokia phone. They were virtually indestructible, right? You could almost use it as a doorstop if you had to. They're great phones. I loved it at that point in time, but they weren't able to shift. And I can just throw in another example to the mix. I mentioned Apple, right? And in the early 2000s, right, we think back to Apple, and they had so many different products on the market, And then they really honed in and they focused, right? And they identified, within the mobile phone space, that next generation with the advent and invention of the iPhone, right? And that absolutely revolutionized the industry. And Nokia was not able to adjust and shift in a timely manner, to leverage and to benefit from that. So I would say that a lot of this comes down to a lack of ongoing monitoring and evaluation. And through a disciplined strategy management framework using ESM, it is ongoing monitoring and evaluation. It is just that on a monthly, quarterly basis. You have a robust system, right, from which you can track progress. You can, identify the challenges, uh, what's going on with your competitors, and how do we need to shift the strategy? What do we need to be doing differently? What do we need to communicate to our workforce? And you can make timely incremental adjustments so that you don't wake up one day as a Nokia, right? But rather you wake up and you've been able to successfully shift as an Apple, right? That's what we're trying to do within the system. And look, no system is a silver bullet. But what we are doing is we're trying to give you an edge over your competitors who are not doing this so that you can say, are these KPIs or measures driving the right behavior within our organization today? Are these initiatives moving the dial, right, on our KPIs so that we can successfully execute our strategy? So I think Nokia and Apple are great examples of that illustration.
As we wrap up part one and part two of our podcast, Kent, I know we've been talking a lot about bad strategy execution. Can we talk about successful strategy refreshes and the impact they had on the organization? Do you have a few examples that you can share with us?
Yes. So organizations that successfully refresh their strategy, first of all, they have a disciplined approach to strategy management. They have a governance calendar from which they incorporate not only their strategy refresh, but they incorporate in their budgeting process, their review process, so that they haven't think of it as an overall governance calendar to manage the business. And as such, they are able to bring the team together to reflect on what went well, what did not go well, what do we need to change, right? And that then feeds into a refresh and a revisit of the strategy. It then links into a discussion around we have finite resources and how are we going to spend those resources on the right initiatives that are going to have the most dramatic impact for our strategy. That feeds into the budgeting process and the cycle kicks off again, right? So organizations that have done that really well are those that have achieved breakthrough results. I like to think back to some of our classic cases. Mobil Oil Corporation. In fact, they went from last to first in their industry over a matter of a couple years. And in fact, that ultimately led their strategy implementation work ultimately led to not only the advent of things such as the mobile speed pass and other innovative factors, but it ultimately made them so attractive that they got acquired by Exxon, right? And now it's Exxon Mobil Oil Corporation. So they are an example of an organization that not only executed strategy well, but they also refreshed and revised their strategy. And they were able to iterate against that strategy with the different dynamics in oil prices, um, demand for different lubricants within the oil industry, as well as just really execute, in face down strategy. AT&T Canada is another great example of that organization literally went from losing $1 million a day by turning on the lights, right? And the CEO, Bill Catucci of AT&T Canada, tells this story of how every day they were losing $1 million just by staying in business. And they were able to completely transform that organization They had a burning platform. They were able to refresh their strategy, put in a disciplined model, and turn that organization around, right, to becoming a leader in their industry. So those are some of the examples that are, I would say, are extreme. And I'm not advocating that you as an organization are going to have these extreme shifts. Sometimes it's very incremental. We've worked with many healthcare systems and hospital organizations where the difference, in terms of successfully executed strategy is a couple percentage points. So, the shift do not have to be profound from a burning platform to ultimate success as an organization, but it can be incremental shifts to where an organization is able to benefit tremendously, and better serve their customers ultimately. So those are a couple
Great.
examples that come to mind,
Yes.
Dennis.
Expectations, right? Now, it empowers employees with a transparent understanding of organizational objectives, individual KPIs, and how their work contributes to the overall strategy, enhancing motivation and focus. It also supports continuous feedback and coaching, right? It facilitates ongoing feedback loops, coaching opportunities, enabling employees to track progress, identify areas of improvement, and also to develop professionally. It could also be linked to a recognition and reward system, right? Which is a process that's managed
Yes.
by your HR department, where employees would be recognized and rewarded for their exceptional performance. And it can also foster a positive work environment, boosting employee morale and retention. Now, Kent, for our audience out there, what can you say about the importance of adopting a tool like ESM, given what we discussed earlier on, that we're in the era of accelerated digital transformation? Just give me, as we close, the 5 key benefits of adopting a tool like ESM as part of your digital acceleration program.
So, Dennis, what I would, and before I get into those specific benefits, I want organizations and individuals in those organizations to understand that it's not just the technology, it's not just the process, it's not just the leadership, it's all three. Those are really the three legs to the stool to drive an effective strategy management system. And it's important to note that because I'll reference earlier Dr. Kaplan's research on this notion of being a good leader and a manager, right? That's the leadership aspect. You need the right people, right, with the right skill set to be able to drive an effective strategy. You need the right processes, and ESM as a platform absolutely supports those processes. So you need the right processes in place to overcome the challenges when you're implementing strategy, to know what to do when there's too many initiatives, right? When you have too many objectives, to figure out how to hone down and really focus so that you don't dilute your strategy, but you're able to stay focused. And then there's the technology. And ESM software for over 2 decades now has been supporting organization with effective, reporting and strategy execution. So people, process, and technology, I think, are some really critical areas to keep in mind when it comes to setting an organization up for success. So with that said, when we think about digital transformation and what are the key areas that an organization should be mindful of with digital transformation? It's what I would say is that there's such a rapid advancement of technology, right? That's just driving this ever faster digital transformation across really all industries. And I see this even within government sectors, right? You need to be constantly evaluating what are the technologies, and that could be AI, right? That are going to improve my business operations, my customer experience, or my business model, right? Allow me to better deliver to my customers, right? That could be improved automation. It could be in incorporating AI in my call centers and how I'm supporting customers. It could be expanding digital analytics, right? Moving and embracing cloud-based computing, right? Or shifting the organization to digital platforms, right? For improved customer engagement. Um, there's also a need for organizations to constantly refocus on the customer. So I call it customer centricity. Uh, Customer needs, customer expectations by you are evolving, and they're always going to be changing, right? So organizations need to prioritize that customer experience. So you always need to understand that the things that you're doing, back to the strategy map, internally as a business, right, are all driving towards that customer or that stakeholder satisfaction. And just because you're in the government sector doesn't mean that you don't have the customers. You're serving customers internally, you're serving the citizens of the region or the country, right, that you're supporting. So you absolutely still have customers, and you need to have a customer central, right, view to your strategy. I also think organizations should be thinking about, and I know I'm starting to move a little bit in kind of some of the trends and changes here that we need to be thinking about, but ESG, right? The environmental, social, and governance, it's critically important to having a sustainable strategy, right? There's a growing, I think, importance on that. There's an expectation by shareholders, by the community, by your government organizations to do your job and to do it responsibly, right? So whether it's impact investing or sustainable processes, right? You need to ensure that you have good governance in place where ESG is not just lip service, but you're actually doing things that are having an impact, right, on your ESG posture in managing it. So I've seen organizations cascade their strategy to an ESG strategy map to be able to really articulate their ESG position and manage their posture around managing that. I also think, Dennis, along this idea of digital transformation, there's also transformation around work in the way that we know work in this post-COVID-19 pandemic era that we're in. There's been a rapid adoption to remote and flex-based working arrangements within organizations, right? I can guarantee you that we will never move back to the traditional model of most employees being in an office. Flexible work is here and it's going to stay and it'll likely grow. There's an expectation by these future generations that there will be flexibility in working environments and when they do work and how they do the work, right? So organizations need to be thinking about reevaluating physical office spaces and having the right technology and infrastructure in place to be able to support remote collaboration tools. So I think remote and flexible work is critically important there. And then just in terms of the last couple points that I would make is I think that there's a lot of disruption today, and there will always be disruption, especially with the advent of AI. There's going to be new business models that are coming out, right? And it's just becoming more common, and it's impacting more and more industries today, right? So you have to stay vigilant as an organization, right? To these disruptions. You also need to manage, um, your culture, how you're innovating as in a culture, how you're investing in research, R&D, right? So these are all trends as part of, these new business models and the disruptions that we're seeing. So being super vigilant, disciplined around your strategy is, I would say, even more important in this day and age. I also see in the last two trends, and I may have gone over five here, Dennis, I apologize. But I think data privacy, security, it's a very real thing today. It's impacting organizations of all types. People do not want their website, their businesses hijacked, right? And with digital transformation, with so much more being online in the cloud, you must maintain a healthy posture and you must maintain compliance around that posture. And it's not let's do a security audit a year anymore. It's regular compliance posture management, identifying threats, vulnerabilities, understanding the risks, understanding what we're doing to mitigate against those risks. And then the final point I'll make, Dennis, and I promise I'll shut up here, is the globalization, the trade dynamics that are taking place, the supply chain dynamics that are taking place. We think of the geopolitical landscape that's shifting almost on a month-to-month basis now around trade, global trade. It is real, and it can have an absolutely significant impact on organizations, on communities, on entire countries, right? So we need to be really vigilant around, I would say, the risk, in the dynamics that are taking place there, and the impact that they're having on our strategy, our ability to get work done, and to be successful as an organization, be it a for-profit or not-for-profit. So, Dennis, I know I covered a lot of points. I probably went over five there. I apologize. But I really feel like organizations, to be well equipped and ready for today's challenges, needs to be thinking about those areas.
Thank you very much, Kent. Clearly, CEOs, board of directors are living in an era where an increasingly uncertain, turbulent environment, coupled with the growing organizational complexity, it suggests greater centrality of the role of the CEO. So it means that the role of a CEO, right, can be cast in three metaphors as we go forward. Firstly, the board of directors need to decide whether they see the CEO as a parameter player concerned with adaptation of the organization to its external environment, or is an interior designer focused on the management of internal operations of the enterprise, or he could be viewed as a leader of the band, serving as the keeper of corporate values and providing strategic vision and direction to the organization. But I would say, Kent, going forward, we need a different caliber of a CEO. It's none of the three that I've just explained just now, because your future CEO has to deal with challenges associated with artificial intelligence. Your future board, in the era of intelligence, artificial intelligence, is to ensure that the organization relies heavily on data and analytics. Board members should possess knowledge of data-driven decision making, knowledge about data privacy, as you alluded earlier on, cyber security, and how AI algorithms work. Understanding how to leverage effectively will be crucial for strategic planning and ensure ethical AI practices within organizations. So clearly, going forward, there's a need to relook all these governance models, the role of board of directors, the role of CEOs, the role of executive managers, and most importantly, the use of data to support decision making. Kent, thank you so much for your participation in this podcast. You helped our audience to address quite a number of issues around strategy refresh. Thanks again for elaborating on some of the events that played a crucial role in reshaping post-COVID-19 strategies. Some of the events that you covered include digital transformation acceleration, global supply chain disruptions, changing consumer behavior and preferences, remote work revolution, and the new landscape that is now shaping how organizations function, whether in a decentralized environment, whether it's in the sector of manufacturing, education, or mining. We are all affected in this. But as we wrap up, Kent, at the next session, I would like us to look at data models, data architecture, and how ESM interacts with external applications, because now we're moving closer to an environment where a closer collaboration with other applications is required, particularly now that we've got AI. How will tools like ESM interact with such applications? How would ESM support such applications in terms of data collection, or it could be in terms of facilitating dissemination of decision-making data? And we'll leave it at that for now. And Kent, Managing Director, ESM Software Group, United States of America. Thank you, Kent.